Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for attending our last webinar that's going to kick off for the session for New Jersey City University's Department of Ed Tech Spring Webinar Series in 2021. I'm Dr. Samantha Bana, and I'm going to help Catherine host by helping with the questions. If you put them in the chat, I'd be more than happy to help field those for Catherine as she gets started. This webinar is brought to us by New Jersey City University's Department of Educational Technology, where we have programs in master's education and doctoral education as well in ed tech. We also have programs in STEM certification, which is brand new, and there'll be 7-week courses that you can get a STEM certificate. So it'll be one of the first in the state of New Jersey, which is super exciting. We are proud to begin offering that starting in the summertime, as well as our assistive technology certificate for students with exceptionalities. So I'm going to turn it over to Catherine as she gets started, and we're excited to see her presentation this evening.
Hi, everybody. I'm excited to be here. I'm just going to quickly share my screen for everyone. That should be good. Looks like it. Okay, awesome. So my name is Catherine Nevis. I am currently a middle school special education teacher. I am a doctoral student at NJCU. I'm a Google certified trainer, educator, innovator, all that fun stuff. And I'm really excited today to talk to you about how to use Google Workspace to build supportive online communities for your students. So if you would like to follow along with the presentation, if that is how you learn best, feel free to go to the URL up here. That's tinyurl, and it should be all lowercase letters except for the numbers 94. But I'll give you a minute in case you want to follow along that way, and I will try to put it in the chat as well at the end, just in case you want to follow along. I'll give everybody a minute just to get into that if they would like to. All right. Okay, so if you need it at the end, I can always flip back to this first slide. That way you can have the presentation and refer back to it as needed. Okay, so what I'm planning to talk about today is a couple of different strategies and frameworks for how to support your students in an online space. I'll touch on different differentiation strategies. I'll touch on personalized learning strategies, modifications and accommodations, the universal design for learning framework, and just in general, other supportive strategies when working with students in an online space. My whole goal for the presentation is more to focus on the strategies that could support all learners, as opposed to just saying these are specifically for students who might have an IEP or a 504 plan. These can be for any of your students who might be struggling or need extra support when they're working in an online space. And how this is going to work is I'm planning on taking you through the different apps within the Google platform one at a time. And we'll talk about different strategies you can use within that app. So you might see a little bit of overlap as we go through, like, oh, I heard that this might be a strategy I can use with Google Slides, and now we're learning about it within Docs. And that's just kind of how I organized it. So if you have any questions as I go through, feel free to drop them in the chat. As a special education teacher, I am very used to students in the online space just unmuting and just saying things at me. So I'm okay with asking any questions that you have as we go along. All right. So before I even get started on anything, just so everybody knows, Google Workspace is the new name for Google for Education. They just transitioned the name. They did change some of the colors of the logos as well, but it's the same apps, same platform, just a new name and a slightly different look, just so everybody's on the same page about that. All right. So before we get into all the fun stuff with the different apps and the different tools, I did want to just briefly address the differences between the different supportive learning strategies, just as a refresher. We hear these terms a lot in education, but it's always good to review. So differentiation tends to be a supportive learning strategy that is group-based, where you're splitting your students up into readiness levels based on what skill they are ready to tackle. Usually you're differentiating by the content, we're learning different things. The process, we're doing the same thing, but in slightly different ways, or the product, we're assessing students on the same thing, but they can pick and choose how they're being assessed. Generally, same objectives for all students, but we're just grouping them and giving them that targeted support that they need as a group. Individualization, just like the word suggests, is more individual focused, but the teacher is responsible for the customization of the lesson. So the teacher decides, okay, student A needs this, student B needs this. I'm going to give them that targeted support that they need. Personalization, by contrast, while it's also individual focused, it's student centered. So the student is deciding what they need and they're designing and driving their own instruction, their own learning. So individual is more teacher driven, based on student needs, whereas personalization is student driven based on student needs. And then the UDL framework is just a framework that you can use when you're planning to support all your learners. So instead of kind of targeting your students based on whether or not they have that designated support, it's considering as a whole when you're designing, what do my students need based on what I've observed, and how can I build that into my lesson? And you want to think about flexibility in what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how they're doing it. And then it's adjusted for student strengths as well. Okay, so now I'm actually going to dive into the fun stuff. So we're going to start with Google Classroom because first and foremost, that's usually the go-to one. So the first thing I wanted to talk about with Google Classroom that could be considered a supportive framework is literally how we design our Google Classroom. So unfortunately, Google Classroom, unlike traditional learning management systems, does not offer a lot of customization in terms of how it's organized. You have your tabs at the top, you have your stream, your classwork tab, your grades tab, your people tab, and that's kind of all you have. And you really don't have a say in how you can kind of organize that. But what I've found is that there are some ways you can play around with the structure and organization of your Google Classroom that can benefit the needs of your students. So I have two options on the screen. These are both my Google Classrooms for two different classes. And what I have to ask myself when I design my Google Classroom each year is, how can this help my students the best? How can I organize this in a way that's not overwhelming, that's structured, so that my students can follow along and easily find what they need? So the first option is organizing by week. I do that for my intervention classes. So the students know to go to the header at the top, which is the most recent week. I do the little emojis on the side just because to me it's nicer than seeing just regular text, but that's just me. And that's the 8th graders who really like that the most, by the way. I teach middle school, so even the middle schoolers do like my little emojis. But that's by week, so kind of easier to structure that way. And if you notice too, all of the assignments are numbered. I've found over the years that with Google Classroom, one of the best ways to support my students was to easily tag assignments with numbers. So I don't have to say like, oh, go to the assignment called suffixes that make verbs and adverbs. I could just say, go to, 067, and they know right where to go because there's only one assignment called 067. I've also found, just as a fun fact, it's easier for parents as well when you're putting it in the grade book, especially now virtually. If I just title the assignment, 067, the parent doesn't have to ask necessarily, oh, what is that assignment? They just go to Google Classroom with their child and see, oh, it's right there, 067, that's what's missing or incomplete. The other option is to organize by unit. That's what I do for my language arts classes, just because that's easier to structure for me. But I do keep that numbering consistent. So I do, number, point, another number. So like if you look up here, I have unit 5 is what we're on right now. So the newest assignment is 5.17. It's the 5th unit, the 17th assignment. But same thing, I just tell my students, today we're working on 5.17 and they know right where to go. Or you know what, we're returning back to 5.14 today. And it's just a quicker way for them to think about the assignment and giving them this lengthy title. A lot of teachers will label by date, but I don't assign things every single day. So I think it's just easier for me to say, you know what, let's go to this number really quick, nice and easy, find the assignment, and we're ready to go. Okay. A lot of people are familiar with the Google Classroom differentiation feature that when you go into an assignment, you can hit the drop-down menu where it says all students and select individual students to complete that assignment. So it's targeted just for them, which is great for differentiation if you're doing like that group work. It's great for assigning maybe extension activities to 1 or 2 students that nobody else sees. I know from my students' experiences that just assigning it to the individual students is easier than having everyone see it and be like, is this something else I have to do? Like, no, it's, that's an extension activity. So being able to pick the students on an individual basis is very helpful. I like it because the students can't see what is not assigned to them. So if they are not assigned that particular assignment, they cannot see it. However, if you are doing a differentiated activity, or maybe you're giving a modified version, like if you're in an in-class support inclusion setting and you're doing a modified test, I do like to call the assignment the exact same thing. So if you look at my little GIF over here in the corner, there's two that say 2.19. They're titled exactly the same. So if a student were to like walk past another student's desk, they would see that it's still labeled the exact same way. What's inside is different, and I'll be able to see, you know, which assignment is which, but they only see the one that's assigned to them. Oh, also that's really good for discussions, because if you can post a differentiated question where you're only assigning that question to specific students. Like I used to like to do it, it's not support related, but I like to do it with book clubs. And only students who are in that particular question are able to respond back and forth to each other. So it avoids the whole everyone contributing to that one question. It's just for those students who have been assigned that question, just as a little side note. This is kind of a small tip, but I found it really helpful, specifically in online learning. Every assignment, every post on Google Classroom has a link. So when you click the 3 vertical dots, there's an option to copy link. And what that does is that link sends the student to that individual assignment on their Google Classroom. Not the attachment in the assignment, but just the view assignment page itself. So they'll see the directions, the your work section, any private comments, any rubrics you attach. I found that that's really quick and easy. I live and work in Western New Jersey, and the Wi-Fi is not fabulous sometimes where I work and teach. So I found that this is an easy way to get students to the right place quickly. So if we're working synchronously, the Google Meet tends to slow things down. It's hard for them to get onto Google Classroom, wait for it to load, wait for the assignment, scroll down. So I'll sometimes just hit the vertical dots, hit copy link, and drop it in the chat. And they can instantly just click it and get to that one assignment right away. It is important to note that if you are using that feature, it only works for that classroom. So like if you use the same assignment across multiple classes, each individual post has its own individual link. So like if you have a period 5 class and a period 6 class, it could be the exact same assignment, but they're 2 different links, just so you know. But it's very helpful in terms of supporting students because they can get somewhere really quick and they know exactly where they're supposed to go. This is a new update to Google Classroom, which is great for supportive purposes because previously Google Classroom didn't allow for any kind of text formatting. So you'd just kind of dump all your directions and maybe you'd have to throw in an emoji to do bullet points. But the update now allows for you to have bolded, italicized, underlined, and bullet points. So you can really have your students' eyes drawn to different parts of the directions. You can do that bullet point step by step so they know how to follow along. And it's just a lot more accessible for everyone because they can really have their eyes drawn to certain parts of the assignment. I used to just have to capitalize everything to make the students see it, which isn't the most accessible thing. But now that I have bolded options, my students' eyes can go to the most important parts. I wish that too, I saw the comment about this, the size for the font. I would love to make the font bigger. This is so tiny. I wish that they had that option. I wish they had highlighting as well. Like I like to highlight specific things sometimes. So the bigger text would be nice though, definitely. I wish that that was an option. Maybe someday. I'll have to keep hitting the, if you hit the question mark, you can keep reporting things that you want. I did that all the time with the differentiation feature before it came out. Eventually, somewhere down the line, it will roll out if enough people ask for it. All right, I'm gonna jump to Google Forms. So like I said, I'm breaking it up into just the different apps and different strategies. So this is something that I started last year when we went fully virtual and we were all kind of, the students were kind of learning in this new format. It's really great for long-term assignments. I wouldn't say like one-day assignments, but like things that take multiple days, multiple tasks within an assignment. What I'll do is I'll use a Google form to create a self-check quiz for my students so they can see what they have to do. We're doing this now because we're doing a long-term literary analysis project. So it's multiple weeks, multiple steps. So I like to make sure they know exactly what the directions and expectations are. This is example from the board is from when I was absent and I wanted to make sure the students knew what to do when I was absent. You can create a Google form and use the go to section based on answer options to create this kind of self-check quiz. So I would create a question within a section and have 2 multiple choice or 3 multiple choice answers. When you select from the bottom, there's a little drop down at the bottom. It says go to section based on answer. You can have it set so that when the student clicks a certain answer, they are sent to another section of the Google form. It's a little cumbersome to set up initially, but once you create one, it kind of just flows nicely from there. But it's great because it becomes not just a regular quiz. It's a way for them to check to see what they should be doing. Like, what's the first thing you're supposed to do? Are you supposed to go to this website, or are you supposed to work on this first? And they click the wrong answer and they get sent to a page. It's like, oh, not quite. Go back and review the directions. And they kind of have to work their way through the Google form to figure out what they have to do. You could make it extra fun if you wanted by uploading it to Fobi.io. That will take one of these quizzes and it will turn it into a chat bot, which you could push out to your students and they could literally just converse with a chat bot to figure out the directions. Like this GIF that keeps recurring over and over is, it talking to my students, what do you have to do today? What's the first step? Okay, great, that's right. Now what's the second step? Oh, that's not right. Okay, you have to do this instead. And it kind of becomes like this interactive way for them to ask questions about an assignment, which is also great if like you're working asynchronously and they may not have access to you right away. It becomes an option for them to look at to figure out what to do next. Another great supportive feature within Google Forms is the option to add personalized feedback. So if you are doing an assessment or an assignment, it doesn't have to be graded, you have the option to give feedback, but not only personalized feedback, you have the option to link resources as well. So you can literally go in and give individual feedback on one student's answer, but you can also then hyperlink a video if you want to have a review, have them look at, an example of how to solve a problem over again, or you can link outside resources as well. So you can see from here, I linked a central idea video that I had shared in class and said, okay, you can review this. Also, here's the link to my office hours because, we probably should go over this together. So as the student is looking through the feedback, they're able to click on one of those 2 options and either get the help through the video or they can come see me. But I really like that that's personalized. It doesn't have to go to all students. And it's only when you're going through the responses that you can really go in and add that and then send it back to the student and they get that individualized feedback. That's so important in so many supportive learning frameworks. Okay. This is something I started doing this year and I found that it's been really helpful for my students, particularly online. In this kind of climate where we have grades, but my students are stressing out about them and they shouldn't be. So every time they see a Google form, my students' automatic assumption seems to be that they're going to be graded on it and it's going to be like a test. Like, this is a test I'm taking and it's going to be in the grade book. So what I've been doing a lot lately in an effort to be more supportive is making the assignment graded, but worth 0 points. So what happens is you're creating a traditional Google form, you set it to be a quiz, and then where it asks you for the point value, you make it 0. So instead of adding 1 point, 2 points, whatever, how many points, you just make it 0 points. You can still choose correct answers, but there's no point value added. So you can see from this example, the student got it wrong. They have the correct answer, but their score is no matter what, 0 out of 0. So there's a lot of difficulties that my students were experiencing with, okay, I see my score. Oh, it's a failing score. I don't want to look at anything else because I feel defeated. So this kind of forces the student to go back and say, okay, it's 0 out of 0, but yes, everybody got 0 out of 0. Now I actually have to go through each response and see what I actually got wrong because there's no actual score. Because if they see, 5 out of 10, they're going to know right away they got 5 wrong. But if they just go through and they're going through each of the questions because they don't know what they got right or wrong, it's a little bit more authentic, and then they can actually read the feedback and look at it and take it into consideration and things like that. So this is a very small thing to do, but it's actually made a really big difference for my students because that number really bothers them. And it also encourages them to look at the feedback, which is great. Okay, so I'll jump from forms now into slides. Okay, so this is more of an effort toward personalized learning that I started to do at the beginning of this year. It's been really great for my students. I am a special education teacher, so my students do have annual goals that they have to achieve by the end of the year that we work toward. So this is my effort to do that, but it also works for just general goal tracking for students as well. So what I started doing was I used a blank year-long template of a slide presentation. I take them from SlidesGo or SlidesMania because they have so many free ones that are just fantastic. So you don't have to make your own slide templates all the time. And then I make a copy of this blank template for all my students, just blank, nothing in it. I might put the school year on it somewhere on the title page, but other than that, I leave it completely blank pages. And then what I'll do is I'll go through each of the students' assignments by toggling back and forth. So like, look at this middle section here. You have the student's name and you use the arrow to toggle back and forth between assignments. I'll actually go through and start adding slides with individual practice activities for them. So I kind of created like this bank of slides that I could copy and paste based on different skills. I paste it into the individual student slide presentation, then click to the next student, add their individual practice. And it's a really nice way to have all that goal practice in one space while still making it personalized. So it does take a little bit of time to do that. Again, I just kind of thought that it was great to have like a bank of different skill practice activities. Like I'm language arts, so here's a lot of different activities about context clues and inferences and citing evidence and central idea, and just pulling activities from there based on their individual goals and their individual skills where they need improvement. And then every week, just putting a new one into that portfolio for them. The students can just go right to their portfolio, go to the new, go to that same assignment every week, and then there's the new activity. And then I click through and give them feedback. Like you can see at the bottom here, like I put a little fake completed stamp on it, and then I gave them a score to show them how they did. And then the following week, there'd be a new activity there as well. So then they can go through the presentation as well and see how they did, how they're growing. It is a lot of effort, especially on an individual level. For me, I only have about 40 something in my, to my resource and intervention classes. So even that is still a lot, but once you create all those templates, it's easy just to kind of drag and drop them in. And it's a great way to kind of get that personalized, practice going. If that doesn't appeal to you though, the portfolio has also been great for my students. It's great in terms of being a supportive framework because it gets students to take accountability for their learning and what they're learning. And it kind of gives them a little bit of ownership as well. So I did the same thing. I took a blank template, I dropped it in and made a copy for each student. And every week the students add artifacts. This is for my intervention class because we don't have grades in my intervention classes. So every week they add something they knew they did, something new they practiced. I go through as the teacher and I add their official scores in. So same thing, just click through each student, input their individual scores. We shared that document with their parents. It's available on Google Classroom. And when I say, okay, go to your portfolio, it's always at the top and they know where to click and they just keep adding things to it. So if you're not into the whole personalized practice thing, this is another type of activity that you could do just to kind of keep track of individual student progress. And it's just something good for them to reflect on their learning and to look back on and see how they've grown with slides. Okay. Okay, so the help box in Google Slides is something I just started experimenting with because I realized that a lot of my students were struggling with writing assignments. So this was something that I kind of got away from docs for writing because I think they saw the doc and was like, okay, it's a giant blank template. And then they see slides and they're like, oh, slides are more fun. It's a presentation. So what I started doing was giving students a box on the side of their Google slide. And what they can do is they have different resources in there that can help them. And they can click on those resources and it will take them to an outside source or to a different slide in the presentation that can help give them the support they need to answer those questions. So this particular question was about theme. If they're sitting there and looking at their document and they're like, I have no idea what I'm doing with theme, they have a topics list, they have mentor texts, they have, examples for how to find text evidence, and it was all kind of there in this little box for them. I like it better than putting it in Google Docs just because it's a little bit more organized. You got the text box for them to type, you got the text box, the help box for them to click on, and the question at the top. It was just like quick and easy to build. But that's been helpful for my students because they don't have to go hunting around for the resources. It's just like, help, I don't know what to do. And they can click over right to the side right away. And it's just right there for them. It normalized it too. Because a lot of my students were like, I don't want any help, I'm fine. But having it on their screen like that really helped them be like, you know what, it's there, I might as well use it. Okay. One of the biggest things this year I've learned with being virtual is, yes, graphic organizers are valuable for supporting students. Creating graphic organizers are kind of a pain in Google Slides and Google Drawings sometimes. Things get dragged, things get moved, not necessarily to where you want them to go, not on purpose, just, you know, I'm typing and I'm moving things around and all of a sudden my graphic organizer is all messed up. So what has been really helpful this year and could be really supportive for your students as well is the idea that I'll take a blank slide presentation and I'll build out the graphic organizer that I want. The same way you would print one out off the computer, like this is what it's going to look like. Then I will save that slide as a JPEG. You can just go File, Download, and then this slide, and it'll turn it into a JPEG file. Upload that JPEG as your background for that slide. And then all of a sudden the template becomes the background, so students can't change it. So like for my students that needed more scaffolding and more support with their topic sentence for their paragraph, I didn't want them to change all of the text in here. And I didn't want them to feel like they had to, because they're gonna look at that, you know, sentence and be like, what do I do with these words? Do I leave them here? So what I did was I just filled it in, and then I put in text boxes. So they knew anywhere they can click in is what they had to fill in. The yellow was the one character trait, the blue was the other, and they knew that was where they had to click to type in. So there was no aspect of, okay, I'm going to, you know, move around the boxes accidentally and mess up my organization potentially for this essay. It was all just clear cut in the background for them. Okay. Going on to the collaboration aspect of, you know, obviously in supportive learning frameworks, collaboration is super important. This is something that my students have really enjoyed this year, and it really gets the collaboration going. We really have been taking advantage of the jigsaw opportunities to learn from each other, learn about a topic, then share about it. But it's hard to share in the online learning environment. I think we've all experienced that. You know, who's having difficulty unmuting their mic, whose computer is very slow, things like that, who's uncomfortable sharing through video chat, things like that. So what we've been doing is I've been creating a slides presentation, and each student gets their own individual slide. You put their name up in the corner so they know exactly where they're going. I don't know what grades everybody teaches, but in middle school, it's like, he's on my slide. I wanted that slide. Now he's on my slide, even in middle school. So it's nice to have their own designated space. And even I feel that as an adult when I was working a slide presentation the other day, and I was like, I was on slide 6 and I started typing, and then you started typing on slide 6. That's not going to work for me. So it's good to just kind of set that designated space for them. So I add their name. I have a spot for them to upload their project, whatever they did, which is great because it's not always the same. You know, show me what you learned. You know, share a video that you made of something you learned, share a paragraph that you learned, share bullet points what you learned, share an image you created what you learned. Just drop it into the box. They can, because, you know, Google Slides is great for being able to insert images and inserting hyperlinks and everything like that, inserting videos. So they just drop it in the spot in the middle of the slide. And then their classmates can click through the slides and view each project or each, you know, display of learning. One, they get to see other ways to display learning and convey learning besides their own preferences, which is great. And two, it gives them an opportunity to learn from their classmates. I like to include a table on the side that allows for peer feedback. So my students can then click, you know, if there's an empty space in one of the comment boxes, they can add a comment. My students like the emojis as well, so I like create a little emoji template over here. They can click and drag different parts of the project they liked. You know, they could move the emoji to whatever part, you know, inspired them. That's what the light bulb is for. It's the inspiration section. But it's another way to give feedback as well. And that's been great for students learning from each other, because my students who aren't too happy with talking on the computer feel comfortable in this space because they feel like they can share, but they're not on display necessarily. And it's great for asynchronous as well. Students can go back and review it and leave their comments on their own time and things like that. And since collaboration is so important and learning from each other is so important, when you consider the supportive learning frameworks, this is just something you can consider. All right, jumping into docs. Any questions so far before I dive into docs? I'm a big fan of talking really fast and throwing things at people, so I hope I'm not going too fast, but feel free to let me know if I am. My students are more than happy to tell me when I'm going way too fast for them. So feel free to just be honest. It's fine. All right. Oops. There we go. Oh, I don't know why that happened. There should be an example down here. And if you look at the presentation, there probably will be, but it doesn't want to come up today. That's okay. All right. So this is kind of similar to the slides one I had talked about, but it's with docs. So what I really liked doing this year too is the idea of creating blank assignments for students in Google Classroom. So I'll create an assignment and I'll just upload a blank document. Because sometimes when you're doing a lot of individualization of assignments, the differentiation feature gets really overwhelming, especially when you're giving, 10 different versions of one assignment. Having 10 different assignments on your stream as a teacher is a little much. So this is an alternative that I found, and I don't know if anybody else kind of has this struggle, but this is something that I found to work for me. I uploaded a blank doc to the assignment, and then I push it out and make a copy for all students. So essentially, students all just have a blank document now. And then I can go through, click through each student's individual blank assignment and paste their individual assignment for them. So then for me, it's all in one place, but the student only sees their individual assignment. So what you would have seen if these images had loaded was that they were the same article, but I had different text boxes broken up in the middle to ask different types of questions about the article. So some students were being asked about context clues, some were being asked to make inferences, some were being asked to analyze the word choice used depending on where they were. But that was something I was able to do by just, having a general running doc of every assignment I wanted to give, copying and pasting them for each individual student. Okay. Most of us know about the Google Docs and Google Suite features for chatting, but it's always good to throw in anyway, just because it's really great for support. I mean, we use GoGuardian in my district just for contacting students during class time to help them out on their school issued devices. But if you don't have that, this is a nice alternative, going into the assignment and being able to click on them and click on their icon and just chat them, do you need help with this? So for that synchronous chat option, obviously you can make comments on things, but that's more of asynchronous time. So it's really nice to be able to have that just immediate response with them. Okay. This is something I had started for my students when we had asynchronous work or asynchronous days and we're out sick. If we're virtual, we're no longer virtual. But when we were virtual, we used to leave asynchronous work for the students. This is also great if you are somebody who likes to do, you work independently on these tasks while I teach this lesson, then I'll pull you and we'll work in groups and things like that, or stations. This is a running list of asynchronous activities that I keep with my students. This is what you're expected to accomplish during the week. I can hyperlink the assignment right from there so they can click on it and go right to the assignment. It could just be a bank of independent work for them to complete if they're, practicing skills and things like that. I like to color code it so the students know what they're supposed to be doing. Like if it's, green, that's something you can pair up with someone and work with if you want to. If it's orange, that's with me. You can't do that alone. If it's yellow, that means you got to do it by yourself. But it's really good for them. But I really like the fact that if you right click on a bullet point, you can turn it into a check mark. I don't know. My students were like, when I told them that, they didn't know. I didn't really know until a couple years ago. But that's great for checklists. So I have this list, are you done? They can right click and then turn it into a check mark to show that they're finished with the assignment. That's my little bonus. But these kind of running lists are great if you're doing a lot of independent asynchronous work. It's great to have it kind of all in one place where they can kind of go through and say, okay, what do I need to do? And it's a good place to practice that linking of assignments from your classroom as well. Okay, this is the ELA teacher in me, but I can see how it works for math teachers as well. If you are working in a Google Doc and you hyperlink something, specifically a slide or another doc, instead of just clicking on it and going to that assignment, you can hit open preview and it opens the preview right in that doc. So I am a big mentor text person. My students really need that support. So what I do when they're writing is I will link, here's an example of a finished, description, compare and contrast paragraph. But it's a lot on a Chromebook to toggle back and forth between tabs, and the splitting screen is very small. and a lot of students don't have multiple monitors, so it's very difficult. This is like the great alternative, and it's really, really helpful for students. My students really love it. So they click on the example hyperlink, and they hit open preview, and then right like over here, it pops up like this, and they can see exactly what is on that slide that was being hyperlinked right next to them, so they can type and look at it at the same time. Like, here's the example, I'm typing over here, it's still over here in the corner for me, so I can like look at it while I'm writing. I could see that working for math too. Like, here's an example of how to solve that problem, click, and then it's right there. And the best part is, if you're doing it in slides and linking that to Google Docs, what you can do is have different examples on multiple slides. When you're on that slide, take the URL from the top, and that will link the student to that exact slide and not the entire presentation. So like, if you're like, okay, slide 2 is compare and contrast, I'm taking the URL when I'm in slide 2, putting that in, and then when they click that link, it'll go right to the compare and contrast paragraph. That's my writing personality coming out, but I think that's really helpful, and it's really supportive for students as well. Okay, so as this is my UDL kind of idea, I like to create a lot of tables and give students options for how to explore different topics. What each of these buttons does is it links to a resource, and what you can do is give students just ways to explore a topic on their own. We were reading Look Both Ways, the first chapter, which talks about water bears, and my students were like, I had no idea what you're talking about. And so I was like, great, like we can explore a topic of water bears. So, you know, take 10 minutes and click the YouTube link for a video, or the images are infographics, or the little robot is a different website, or, you know, the image is a picture of a water bear, or, you know, common lit is an article if you want to read an article. So I gave them a bunch of different options to explore the topic. Then we kind of came back together and talked about what we learned. But it was great because the students could pick how they wanted to learn best, which is good for you because you get to see how the student learns best and how they think they learn best as well. It's interesting to see. I was like, no one's going to pick the article in my class. They're going to just watch the video. A lot of kids picked the article. I was very surprised. So it was great to see, you know, how they like to get their information. And then because they were all different sources of information, when we came together for a discussion about what we learned, there was a lot of different information being shared. So it was great to be able to see like, okay, here are the commonalities and what we found. And then here's fun facts from a bunch of people that we didn't know because our source didn't tell us that. So it kind of goes with the UDL idea of giving them options, giving them choice. But you know, it also gives them the ability to kind of figure out how they learn best while still learning from each other. Okay. I always go collaboration because I think that's important, especially online. This is just an idea if you are somebody working with text. I just wanted to throw this in there. This is one of my students' favorite things to do, and it's great from the supportive concept of they're learning from each other and learning with each other. I give them an article. I put it in a 2-column table on Google Classroom. It doesn't have to be a super long article like this. It can be something short, it could be a paragraph, it could be sentence by sentence, whatever you want to have them look at. And what I have them do is they annotate together. So on one side of the Google Doc is the article, on the other side is the space for annotations. So you're going to see, this is a screenshot of my students' work with all of the different colors. They picked those colors. What I cropped out of the top was their names were at the top, and they highlighted or changed the color of whatever color they picked for themselves. So then I could see what annotations they were making. They can reply to each other as they're making annotations. So it's great from a collaboration and support perspective because you're kind of working through a project together and learning from each other. And this was done fully silently as well. So the students kind of work through. Some of them are listening to the article with text to speech, some are not. They can go at their own pace. They can ask questions and then reply to each other. Like you can see here, like someone highlighted autopsy and they said, what is that? And then somebody else replied because they knew the answer to it. So it's a great supportive concept because they're learning a skill, which is important. And they're working together, which is important, but they're getting that support from their peers as well. I just wanted to throw in their choice boards, but kind of, you know, a basic idea of a 3x3 table with different options for how students can convey their learning. I haven't used them as much this year, but they're They're good in terms of having choice and differentiated options that students can pick for how they learn best. I like to have the proposal option because there's always a couple of students who are like, I hate all of these and I want to do this. And I'm like, that's great, because I didn't even think of that idea. So you go for it. And they'll propose an idea, you know, for how to show their learning that maybe I hadn't thought of originally. Okay. Everybody good still? Okay. Just want to make sure. All right. I'm getting through docs. I'm almost done with docs. So this is an idea that I used to do in the classroom when we were, you know, could physically move around. We can no longer physically move around, but it still works. So this is readings, like I call them my reading centers. You could just call them any centers that you wanted. But what I do is I create a really long Google Doc, essentially, with different activities built in. So the title page looks like this and has different hyperlinks, but the hyperlinks are within the doc itself. So when they click on center 3, it will shoot them down to center 3 in the document. I always put a little icon at the bottom of the, you know, whatever assignment that center is, that takes them back up to the top. That's why there's the little blue icon up here, because when they click, you know, either the stop sign or the return button, it'll shoot them back up to the top of the document. But it's great in terms of visualizing your center work. It keeps it all in one place instead of having to upload different assignments everywhere. All of the work is right there in that document. And then what I like to do is I like to go into the individual student's work, because no student is going to do 11 centers. And I'll pick like 3 that they have to work on. Like, okay, you were struggling with these 3 skills. I want you to do these. You have to do them. Those are not negotiable. Do 2 more, but I don't care what they are. You pick them. So that gives them the choice as well. So I kind of mix up the different options for what they can work on. It's interesting to see what choices they do pick to work on. Like, these are nonfiction reading. And I, you know, maybe I thought they did a really great job with author's purpose, but then they picked the author's purpose because they felt like they didn't. So it's good to kind of get that insight. But I like the element of balancing the, okay, I want you to do these because this is what I need you to do. And then you pick whatever other ones that are just interesting to you to finish up. Takes a little while to make these, but they're really great in terms of keeping everything all in one spot for your students. And it works digitally, because we've been doing them digitally, and it's been okay. It's not the same as moving around the classroom, unfortunately, but it's okay. All right. I'll briefly touch on some of these activities, because I talked a lot more than I anticipated. But there's different options for breakout rooms. If you are, even if you're not an enterprise user, for me, I don't know if everybody's using Meet. Even if you are a Google Classroom user, you might not be. But before we got enterprise, I was just using separate Meet links for different activities, and just kind of going back and forth between them for students. But the one thing I really wanted to highlight about the supportive learning strategies is the idea of using breakout rooms as not just collaboration, but as independent working zones. That's something that my students love a lot, and they ask for regularly, whether they're my hybrid or my fully virtual students. They will ask to go into a breakout room when they're at home by themselves. So I have, 12 students in my class. I make 12 breakout rooms, and they each go into their own breakout room. It's great. I can pop in and out of those rooms, and they can kind of work independently. It's like an independent zone. Like they can block out everything else and just work by themselves. And they really seem to get a lot more done in that space, which is great, than as opposed to let's all just sit down and meet together, because we have to stay synchronous the entire day. Like the students don't like sign off at any point in time. So that's been great for them. So they kind of have this zone where they can, look at just a black screen, no correspondence with anybody else, and just get the work done. So that's something that I just wanted to share about breakout rooms. That's been helpful. Okay, I'm gonna jump through. Okay, I'm gonna jump to Jamboard. I skipped a couple of things, but I'll go back to, you can look back at the presentation if you need to. Okay, if you're not using Jamboard, it's really awesome, and you should be with your students because it's super easy to use and very supportive. My other slide for some reason didn't load, but that's okay. Nope, there we go, it's in. So what's great about Jamboard is that it really falls into the supportive framework because they have options. You have an option to show how you want to participate. And that was really the nature of Jamboard, right? It was supposed to be a brainstorming tool. So the students have a choice in how they want to share. They can use the Post-it notes. They can draw things. They can type things out in a text box. They can, physically make it out of shapes. Whatever they want to do to convey what they're learning can be done in the Jamboard. I really like the idea of using it as an independent practice space. Unfortunately, there's only 20 slides per Jamboard, but I mean, if you're working in small groups with students, it's something that's really quick and easy to use. I teach intervention reading for one of my classes, and so we do a lot of spelling, so encoding. And it's a quick way for me to say, okay, spell this word. And they literally, you can see it up here, they will draw it out with their finger on the trackpad, which takes forever. I don't know why they do it that way, but they want to prove to me, I guess, that they're doing it that way and not using text to speech to type it, which is fine. So they'll literally spell it out, and I'll click through each person's slide, star off, circle the ones that need to be fixed, underline where they should be adding letters and things like that. But it's great for immediate feedback. It's great for math for that, in that concept as well. Then they just clear their board, you give them another word, you give them a problem, same thing, and go right through. So if you have, more than 20 students, that's a little bit more challenging because you can't have one slide for each individual person. But if you're working in a smaller group, that is a little bit more feasible then. Okay. All right, so I wanted to give you a reflection opportunity to kind of end out the session before the session ends. So what I did was I put in here a URL to, the URL to a Jamboard. I love Jamboard. And I also put the QR code. Before I leave that up there, I'll show you kind of what it looks like. There is options for ideas you have based on what you heard today, questions you still have, or just other comments that you want to make. This is a template that I leave for my students sometimes at the end of a big lesson. What are you thinking of now? What questions do you have? What other comments do you want to share? So feel free to pick a sticky note and jot down anything that inspired you or anything that confused you or just general comments you want to share. The +1 I like to leave for my students because there's always there's always that person who makes a comment and you're like, yes, that is exactly what I wanted to say. That's what the +1 is for, just to show that, yeah, I agree with that. So I always leave that for my kids. But I will leave that up there. So I'll give you a minute or two if you want to share some of your ideas, just to kind of close out before the end of the hour. And I can also drop the link to that in the chat. The QR code is up there as well if you're feeling like using your phone to scan. I love that the QR codes to Chrome now have the dinosaur on them. So it makes my students happy too. Either way works. So feel free to share anything you learned, any questions you have. You can also drop the questions in here as well, but I just uploaded the template there just in case. And as you're doing that, if you are using Jamboard, they did end up fixing one of the features that everybody felt like it was lacking, which is the revision history. So obviously now, I will not be able to tell who wrote what because we are not part of the same domain and we are all separate Google users. But once you're in your domain with your students, you will be able to see because their name is attached to the work that they're doing. You will be able to see who contributed what. Whereas previously it was kind of difficult to tell unless they put their name on it or you were physically watching in real time. Now you are able to look back and see that revision history as well. So I will jump out. I'm just taking a look at the comments. And if there's ideas you have too that you're like, I think we could use this for this and I didn't think about it, feel free to tell me because I love learning new things. So if there was something you heard that you're like, I'm going to use this for, this idea for this class, especially if you're math, because I've never taught, that's one subject I never taught. So I'm always interested to know how the math people would use the strategies. This is also a really good tool for if you're I call them think, write, share We think about a question, they write it on a sticky note, everybody has to, and then I pick on some people to share. This is a good activity for that too. Oh, chemistry lab directions. You are correct. That would be especially the step-by-step. Yeah, that would be great for chemistry because you have such intensive directions usually. So that would be a great way to use that. Okay, I will leave this up here just in case you want to keep sharing. But if you have any questions or if there's anything I can clarify, please feel free to let me know.
Well, thank you so very much. This was absolutely incredible. There were so many different resources, and it looks like everybody was super thrilled with the information that you provided, even myself. There were some interesting things that I feel like I've learned here too, and I'm super excited to be able to employ some of these as well in my own practice. So thank you very much, Catherine, for taking the time to share some of these resources with us this evening. You did so artfully, and it was extremely exciting to see your energy behind this. I'm very sure that your students have really great instructional activities that are going on in your classroom. So that's amazing. So if anybody has any other questions for Catherine, please make sure, feel free to reach out. She can drop her email if she can be again in the chat or present it again. But she did provide that for you, but she can go ahead and do so. She's dropped it in the chat if you have any questions for her or have any additional things that you'd like to run past. She did also provide the presentation link in there as well. And if you're watching this asynchronously, you can find the presentation link and these resources that Catherine shared today in the description on our YouTube channel at njcu.edu/edtech, and you'll be able to find an archived session of all of our webinars from the spring webinar series that was hosted by New Jersey City University's Department of Educational Technology. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming out. We really appreciate it, and we hope you have a good evening. Thank you so much again, Catherine. This was wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye, everyone.